Hi, I'm Femi OK, and you're in the stream. Today, once referred to as untouchables, Dalits make up nearly a quarter of India's population. So why are their stories largely missing from history books? Now, if the Dalit community is new to you, it won't be by the end of the show. Stick with us. I think you're going to learn something. I definitely have been learning a lot. Malika Bilal, the education starts with you. No pressure.
Thank you. No pressure at all. Well, that's because I have our app. So for those of you who've been following along at home on the app, we're asking this question. What's the most serious issue the Dalit community faces today? There's already been several answers. Bharathas has this one. He says it's the historical erasure, subduing, and co-option of Dalit voices. Now you can send us your answers as well. Just make sure you use the hashtag AJStream.
Now, right with us here on the set, we have Temori Sundararajan. She is co-founder of Dalit History Month, and then sitting right next to her is Sangha Pali Aruna Kamana, and she is a Dalit rights activist. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you.
Half of our guests line up. We're not there yet, but in a moment, you'll hear the rest of our guests and hear from them. But first, here's a little explainer on some of the hashtags we'll be discussing today. According to the traditional caste system, Dalits are members of the lowest social status group, actually born below it. The four primary castes, you're just about to see them right here, are made up of priests, warriors, farmers and servants. Dalits were often made to do spiritually contaminating work like manual scavenging or preparing bodies for the funeral pyre because it's believed that these tasks actually corrupt the soul. Now, despite caste-based discrimination being illegal, many say it still continues. Until recently, Dalit stories were rarely a part of Indian history. Now, using the power of social media, though, some activists are changing that. The Dalit History Month Collective has been posting stories of iconic Dalit figures, and they've created a timeline of parallel history going back 2,000 years and have been engaging in hackathons and lectures. They say that their goal is to change the current narrative. So also joining us in the programme today is the founder of Dalit Camera, Batharan Ravi Chandran. His organisation captures meetings, songs and news events of Dalits and posts them onto YouTube. And we also have Caste Nalayanya. He is an associate professor at the English and Foreign Languages University and a Dalit scholar as well. So welcome everybody. So I did mention that it's illegal to discriminate against the Dalit community, but Sangha Pali, the reality is what in India?
The reality is like we get discriminated in educational institutions. The most reputed IIMs, IITs are the institutions of technology and management, and whenever we want to achieve something, whenever we want to go out of this caste system and try to get what we have been denied of, then we are stopped and we are silenced. So as a student, as an activist, we have been facing this all along the way throughout our lives.
Give us an example from your life.
Well, from my life, if I have to give my own personal experience, it is like we have written test,
yes,
and we have interview to get into a course. When we go to the interviews, we are asked the same questions like the others, but when the results are announced or when we go for the RTI, that is right to information, we get to know that we personally, all the Dalit students are ranked very low. Like we get 5 or 6 out of 30.
Deliberately?
Deliberately. And this is a study.
Why?
Because, okay, there is one thing called affirmative action.
Okay.
That to bring Dalits
So positive discrimination?
Yes,
yes,
absolutely.
Yeah.
So because we have been discriminated and we have never had access to education and the resources around us, the affirmative action was introduced 67 years ago. And today, because we have that in place, people believe that even if we don't have the capacity or the ability, we are getting into premier institutions. So to cut short that, we are scored less, we are given less marks.
Sure.
So we basically get into educational institutions only through our written test marks.
Wow. Tamori, you live here in the States. So if we who live outside of India and outside of this caste system, how would we even know that somebody was from the Dalit community? How would they even know to mark them lower, to discriminate against Dalits?
Well, I think one thing that's really profound is that I think wherever South Asians go, caste follows. So I think that to broader communities that are outside, that aren't of South Asian descent, it's not so easy to be able to tell who is a Dalit. But the reality is that my family had to leave India because of the violence. In fact, my father went to school with the same people who used to chase his village with machetes.
Wow.
And in coming here and being a child of that violence, it was very clear to me that even though the words of that language of terror was not spoken of in our home because we were trying to escape it, it was still present. And as a media maker, I was so struck by the fact that in Dalit circles, we have told the story of caste apartheid over and over and over again. And there's no difference from the story we've told to each other in our homes to the way that we share it on like bulletin boards or on Twitter or on Facebook. But what was remarkable to me is that given the scope and the scale of this human rights crisis, is that we would hear the story about our experience and then nothing within the mainstream media, let alone within the Indian media. So that's why I think projects like Dalit Camera, Dalit History Month, Roundtable India, these are all Dalit-led media efforts that have said enough is enough. We have to break the silence in whatever platform that we can. And not only the story of violence, it's a story of our assertion.
Right. Well, you mentioned Dalit Camera. So Ravi, I want to go to you, but I want to give a little taste about what our community is saying, because this person writes in that, like many Indians of higher caste, she says, I grew up socialized to patronizingly view Dalits as beneath us and to largely avoid them. And so then on the other hand, you have a member of the Dalit community writing to us on Facebook who says, in one form or the other, this continues even today in most parts of India. And there are 100 different ways to debar Dalits from living a quality life with liberty. So Ravi, of course, you heard Tanmori mention Dalit Camera. What are you doing to counteract these 100 different ways of discrimination that this person writes in?
Actually, Dalit Camera work. The Dalit Camera work, and also it doesn't believe that the video which we produce, it changes the viewer's mind. We don't believe that, sincerely. I don't believe. What we do is actually we record the contributions which for Dalit movements. The Dalit Camera is exclusively for Dalit viewers and those who support Dalit movement. Therefore, the discriminations and the atrocities and the biography and the contributions which great leaders have done, we have tried to cover that and keep that on online as an archive source. It's left to them whether they believe it, that they don't believe it, but at least some or the other way people take that.
What do you think the value? What do you think the value is for Dalits who go to your website or go onto YouTube and see Dalit Camera? What do you think they get out of it, Ravi?
It depends upon people. If a Dalit watches it, he feels very comfortable. He feels very happy. He feels very comfortable.
Interesting.
For example, like this panel, the panel which you have chosen.
Yeah.
I've never seen in any Indian news channels to see for. This is the way the discrimination also happens.
So there would be no show in India that would have everybody talking about Dalits and all Dalits in the conversation?
No, all upper caste in India, upper caste intellectuals would be sitting and discussing about Dalits. Upper caste women would be talking about Dalit women in a panel, and Dalit women, one woman would be representing. Some 10 people would be there, and this became a tradition in India. So I would say that is also a way of caste discrimination, what happens in the present form, the way the questions which you put, I was thinking about that.
Yeah.
And the second part also, what I feel is, see, caste discrimination, the question which you should have asked, if I have to reframe,
yeah, go on.
you should have asked, Sangapali, can you name one place where you have not faced caste discrimination?
Oh, I like the fact that Ravi is schooling me. All right, Ravi, I will take your advice there. You heard the question, Sangapali. Name one place. Well, other than here in the stream.
I would say there was no place where we were not discriminated. Since our birth, we have faced discrimination. I have seen violence in towards my family, my neighborhood, just because we belong to a particular caste.
All right, so there's a lot of words that I've seen associated with the Dalit community, and one of them just stands out to me: atrocities.
Atrocities.
So
yes.
my mind is just like trying to get around the idea of what are these atrocities that are so common in everyday life as part of the Dalit community?
Absolutely. I had the same question when I was growing up, looking at the mark, the scar that my dad had because of the, the caste violence that had happened before.
Yeah.
And whenever I used to ask my dad, he would just say, you are a kid, you don't need to know.
Yeah.
But then when I came to know about the various atrocities happening around me, like, women are being raped, women are being killed, women are being lynched, their families are being murdered. What's happening at that time?
Is it because they're not being valued in society? Because with the caste system, as we showed people earlier, Dalits are not at the very bottom, below the caste system.
Absolutely.
So they traditionally were believed to be the lowest of the low, even though it's illegal to even treat you
they are considered spiritually polluting the caste system.
Sacha, yes, go ahead.
No, I just want to intervene here just to kind of change the perspective of the story. Because you have shown me this table of the Brahmins and Kshatriyas and Vaishyas and Untouchables at the end.
Yeah.
And then this whole talk about they are the lowest. So the idea that the Dalits are the lowest is a very recent idea.
Ah, okay.
About 200 years or so. They were not lowest. If you're thinking of a Dalit history, and even the pyramid that you have shown, it actually presents Brahmins at the center. So that is the story that we want to reverse, in the sense that if you go back a little to medieval India or to earlier phases, so the story of the Dalits is kind of very diverse. They were independent, they were contributing to economy, they have civilization, they have major contributions to art and culture. So this idea that they are lowest and they have been oppressed and they have been eternal slaves is a stereotype that has been produced in the last 200 years, especially after the colonial period.
Well, and I think it's important to definitely talk about the contributions of the Dalit intellectual tradition. There is definitely, we have a spotlight in terms of being centered in rationalism, being gender inclusive and egalitarian. But I think what's so hard for people who aren't from South Asia is how does the question of atrocity figure within our history? And I think the only way to understand the use of atrocity is to understand first there is a deep, long history of keeping the silence on caste apartheid. And the way that you have such an inequitable system in place is through these atrocities. And they're reprisal violences. So what happens is whenever the Dalit community does things to exert its human rights, like perhaps go to school or put an electoral candidate into place or decide to build a home because it's a sign of the accruement of wealth, the dominant caste in that area will then choose a family, choose a body, choose a woman, choose someone that represents the best of what we could aspire to, and then we'll do whatever it takes to physically demonstrate on their body that it is unacceptable for you to step outside of the caste apartheid lines. That's why these acts of violence are about shaming. They're about public displays of torture, like hanging and being paraded naked. And it's why, as a community, we have spoken out so much about the fact that it's not about individual perpetrators and individual cases. It's really about the fact that this is a structural problem and it requires structural solutions.
It also sounds to me like it's a whole society that's just bought into this mindset. Because why would it matter if another community were doing well? What has it got to do with you as a community? Why would you then have to go pull them down? But I'm saying that as an outsider. Let me also bring in some other viewpoints as well from our community.
Well,
Malika.
Femi, you mentioned the mindset, and so online people are talking about how do we go about changing that mindset mindset. So here's one idea. This is already being done, of course. Christina says, make it a part of the Indian school curriculum and let our children know what a rich history we have. We have a lot of people saying that. And this is another person on Facebook who adds to that, saying, our accomplishments as Dalit have been excluded, e.g. Dr. Ambedkar's contribution as an economist, and today's feminist movements don't recognize Savitribai Phule's contribution towards women. And apologies if I've butchered those names, but those are two icons from the Dalit community that people are raising as ones that need to be recognized. So what do you think about adding that into the history books? How does that process even begin to happen?
Well, it's profound, because when you think about who we are as Dalit peoples, we're only learning the history of our oppressors. And you know, Janet Mock talks a lot about what it is to have resonance. So as a community living under caste apartheid, if we don't see other Dalits in positions of leadership, Dalits who have achieved, and are hearing a history that basically validates our violence and our genocide, then the ability for us to be able to have self-knowledge and be able to proceed with self-determination is incredibly difficult.
Okay, so we're talking about rethinking Indian history, Dalit history. I really want to hear about, from each of you, a special person in the Dalit community that should be right up there in the history book. Sangha.
Absolutely. There is, there are many, but then I would like to quote one person who has been completely deleted from our history books, that is Jhalkari Bai. She is one of the Dalit women warriors and a legendary revolutionary who led the whole, you know, women cadre into the British camp, you know, just into them, and then, you know, questioned them. And then when the British general looked at her and he asked her, which way should we kill you, or, you know, you want death? She said, whichever way. And then he quotes one thing: if 1% of the Indian women can be like Jhalkari Bai, then the British would have left India long back. So this is what I want to hear.
Yes, and this is why she isn't in the history books, right? Yes. It wouldn't help that colonial history narrative that we have. Satya, jumping, what did you want to add?
No, I just wanted to tell you this one anecdote about Ambedkar, another important thinker and philosopher of Dalits. And,
yes, he's a very famous Indian economist. He's also helped frame the Indian constitution. And did you notice him as the Google Doodle? Have a look here.
Yes.
Yes. Because it is
yes,
here on my laptop. Yes. Dalit History Month, and there we have him there as a Google Doodle. It's kind of amazing, right? That he should be right up there as a member of the Dalit community, as a Dalit hero, basically. So, Satya, how do we reframe history?
Yeah, so as from the 1920s, 30s, 40s, he was in the very center of the struggle, especially for the Dalits and as well as for setting up democracy. But nowhere in textbooks, in curriculum, in public memory, and Ambedkar is available,
that
except
is shocking.
in the memory of Dalits. I'll tell you one anecdote. In the 1990s, there was a meeting in a major central university where there was this discussion about Dalit, the nationalism in India.
Yeah.
And a very famous sociologist called A.R. Desai wrote a book titled The Social Background of Indian Nationalism.
Yeah.
And one of the members in the audience asked this question: Ambedkar was an economist, a sociologist, a constitutionalist, and a lawmaker. And here is a book on sociology of nationalism, but there is no footnote. There is no footnote to Ambedkar. Why is this?
All right,
and that person who asked was Kancha Alaya.
Let me bring in Ravi here. Ravi, if you wanted to introduce our international community to a very special Dalit person, who would you tell us about?
Since everybody talks about Ambedkar, I would say Kalakuri Prasad, whom I've known. So Kalakuri Prasad I would introduce actually.
Okay, and
there are many. You can't name, but Kalakuri.
Bizarrely, I happen to have this poet on my laptop, so let's hear a little bit of the poem here. What do we need to know about him before we hear this poem?
He's a person, if you want to know the difference between, the discrimination between two different writers.
Yeah.
With the merit, you take any writer who got a big award, national and state award, and you take this person and compare with them,
Yeah.
Nobody stands next to him. In a simple sentence, I'm telling you.
Wonderful.
So that the state discriminated, nobody has recognized him except Dalits.
Wow. Well, I have subtitles here so people can read along his poem. And he's speaking in what language, Ravi?
That's Telugu.
All right, Telugu.
Southern India.
All right, okay, have a
And
listen.
also that poem is about atrocities.
All right, okay,
Yeah.
that word again. Okay, let's listen to the poem.
నన్ను బాధితుడని పిలవకండి నేను అమరుణ్ణి ఎగిరే ధిక్కార పతాకాన్ని మీకు చేతనైతే ఆ శవాన్ని నగరం నడిబొడ్డున ఖననం చేయండి ఒక జీవన రవళిని వినిపించే విదురువనాన్నై వికసిస్తాను.
Sangha, you're going to go back to India. We've got a Google Doodle with an iconic Dalit hero right out there. We have this amazing Dalit History Month timeline here, which is just rethinking history from a Dalit perspective, really elevating a lot of very famous Dalit people, or hope to be famous Dalit people. At what point do you go, okay, now I'm happy with the way that Indian history is? When people have that respect and acknowledgement for what Dalits have done in India?
I mean, as I initially said, growing up with the history books that we were introduced to was really a bad thing, because I never associated with the history that the oppressors always wanted to push it on us. But today, when we started excavating our own history, and we found diamonds, we found diamonds that we could actually flatter. I mean, we can say that we are the diamonds. We have so many diamonds behind who have strongly carved us into what we are today.
Yeah.
And if I can, be of, we can say like, if one of the persons like Ambedkar is the only person who is recognized in the whole world today, even that too as a person who has drafted the constitution. There are other contributions which have been ignored. So if we can recognize that, and if we can recognize the women especially.
That is success.
The women.
All right, this is Sangha. She has not finished mining the diamonds. We're going to do some more diamond mining of the Dalit community in a post show at stream.aljazeera.com. But first, here's Malika with some of the other stories that we're following here on the stream.
We'll start with the biggest story on Twitter in India, where netizens are trading blame after a farmer's suicide. Gajendra Singh hung himself at a New Delhi farmer rally where the Aam Aadmi Party was protesting a land acquisition bill that they say will hurt farmers. Hashtag AAP Kisan Rally received more than 40,000 mentions on Twitter. Well, AAP chief Arvind Kejriwal said he told the police to save Singh, but that they didn't listen. Outraged Twitter users pinned the blame on the AAP for failing to stop the suicide, tweeting hashtags like AAP killed farmer and AAP suicide politics. Well, Saffron writes, the party, which can't save a farmer from dying before its eyes, is talking about being pro-farmer. Well, others summed up the situation with hashtag suicide blame game. Joel tweets, first farmer suicide, now suicide blame game. Shouldn't politicians wake up and address the real issues? Well, next we go to a trending story out of Europe. Liberland is the world's newest nation, at least according to its founder. Earlier in April, a Czech politician declared 7 square kilometers between Serbia and Croatia to be the Free Republic of Liberland. And the world took notice. Liberland's founder says more than 250,000 have registered to become citizens. The state has a national anthem, a coat of arms, and even a Facebook page. The draw? If it forms a government, Liberland will be a libertarian's dream. Its founder promises minimum taxes and minimum government. Got another story you want to see right here? Let us know at AJ Stream, and it could end up in the show. Femi?
Thank you very much, Malika. A very ambitious show. We're trying to talk about 20% of India's population in about 24 minutes. That is pretty difficult. So you're going to take Temuri, Sangapali, Ravi, and also Satya to the post show, and you as well, hopefully, to stream.aljazeera.com. Before we get there, though, let me tell you about our next show. Has Ecuador's crackdown on organ tourism and trafficking gone too far? That's a story we'll be looking at in the next 8-day stream. See you soon. Thanks for watching. Hello again, I'm glad you came back. We've got so much more to talk about. 30 minutes is not long enough for one show, so let's get right back to our conversation. Satya, I'm really intrigued about how you recreate, you rebrand, rethink an entire community's history. Where do you even start with that process?
No, here I would like to say something about the History Month itself.
Yeah.
So the way the discussion is going on, as though it is started just now with this campaign. But in fact, I would say that we have to go back to the 80s, 1980s and 1990s, when this independent, autonomous Dalit movement began. And when this the whole series of what you call atrocities, massacres, mass killings, which is a post-independent phenomena. It was not a phenomena of the past. So in that context, the whole question of not just history, but also claiming knowledge, entire knowledge, the rethinking about knowledge as a project. So the whole critique of the Dalit critique of the Indian social sciences, Indian literature writing, Indian history, and those are all there. And the whole campaign at the global level, caste as equivalent to race, the Darban and other contexts.
Sure.
I would see the History Month as a continuation to this series of attempts at the local, national level, and now at the international level. This whole campaign in the sites of Facebook and also in the social media is something that is a follow-up. Even all the names, historical figures, names mentioned, those are all discovered already by Dalit movement in the 70s and 80s.
Right.
So it is some sense, it is an extension of the argument at the global level.
Sure.
So this is one argument I want to make.
So, Satya, hold on, let's do one argument at a time. So you've seen, basically what you're saying is you've seen this before. Why is Sangapali and Temuri still sitting here and still trying to advocate for people in the Dalit community, icons in the Dalit community that should be well known? If this goes back 30 years or so, why has it not been more successful, this activism?
No, it has been successful. That is my point. It has been successful at the national level, but it is not available at the international level in these forums, the new kinds of forums, because simply they were not available before the 90s.
All right,
so what I was
let me
is
just
that
bring up one person then. I love the fact that I'm arguing with people who are experts on the Dalit community and a scholar as well. B.R. Ambedkar, okay. It's been a long time since he was actually recognized outside of the Dalit community. And now you're the political elite of India do recognize him. Are saying, oh, he was a great person now. What do you make of that, Sangapali? Be honest. I see you filtering your answer here. We're in the post show, we're on the internet. Don't filter. There's no filter on the internet.
Oh, there is no filter as such, but they have always been playing this, cards. Like whenever they want, they bring him, and whenever they don't want, they just try to hide our, icons. Right. So this is the time when BJP, the Hindu, fundamentalists are in rule, and they want the whole vote bank. It's not about vote bank even, but it's about, because just last year, Ambedkar has been, mentioned as the greatest man, after Gandhi. So they are slowly bringing, Ambedkar, and they want to talk about Ambedkar's contributions to the, but this is again a kind of hijacking. What we feel proud of, our history.
Is it hijacking or honouring? You can't have it both ways, right? You're talking about your diamonds, so everybody else goes, oh yes, I recognise this diamond.
It has to be honoured. It has to be honoured in a proper way, not just putting the guidelines, but then following the Constitution the way it has been written. If they have to follow the Constitution, then they have to give us the budget rights that we.
So you don't want just lip service, you actually want the life of the community to change.
The actions. This year's budget, if you see, we have been cut by 61% of our budget allocation, and tribals, it is 53% of the budget has been cut short. So this affects our education, this affects our development.
Right.
So if they really want to honor him, then ask them to follow the Constitution.
And it's really ironic that the same people that would put a garland of flowers are the same people that used to protest at his feet, right? These are the same people that would garland him with chappals. And permit the level of atrocity that happens. So there's a level of disingenuousness, especially on our part, because like Sangapali was saying, as the father of the Constitution, all they have to do is implement the rule of law with regards to caste terror, but they do not. So we don't want your celebration. What we want is safety for our communities.
So I wonder then how we go about bridging that gap. And so Ravi, I want to play a video comment from someone in our community who talks about the importance of this History Month, but then says so much more has to be done. So have a listen to what Manu had to say.
Hello to all my friends at the stream. I think that the greatest challenge facing the Dalit community today is the contradiction between constitutional and derivative legal protections and lived realities that Dalits face on the ground. The result is that many people do not know that there is a problem, let alone the magnitude of it. So the challenge is to make the crisis of both extreme as well as everyday violence against Dalits visible and unacceptable, and things like Dalit History Month and the hashtag Dalit Women Fight help to move us forward in this regard.
So Ravi, what are some practical ways for our Indian community watching this for them to bridge that divide between the constitutional rights and then what actually happens on the ground?
See, there are two constitutions in India which Dalit movement and Dalit activists have been talking about. One is the Manusmriti law and the Indian constitution law. Indian constitution is never followed in India as a matter of fact, especially on caste violence and the atrocities and various sexual harassment and any other thing which consists of rights, human rights, fundamental rights. It has never been followed at all. Here they follow the Manusmriti law. You just take the Manusmriti Hindu code law. There, whatever it is given, that is the law which they follow.
So, Ravi,
that
can you slow down a minute? What is that law? Could you just explain it for the rest of us
this is
who don't know
actually
it?
This Manusmriti is the book, hardcore book of a Hindu book,
Okay.
which is written laws of how a Brahmin and how different communities should react to different things.
Okay, got it.
There is a law.
Right.
That law has been followed. You take about atrocities when people speak about, and you just refer the book, and you can find what are the punishments are given. That has been followed in the past also. Maybe Satya sir can interfere in this and talk about that case.
Satya?
Yeah, this is a code, ancient code of the Hindus, and which actually textualizes both the crimes and the punishment, and which are actually part of the psyche of the Hindu caste Hindus in India, and they invoke that when they say they won't allow you to enter the school, they will cite some sloka or some poem from that text.
All right.
So that text is very much lively in their memory.
All right, I'm going to say, guess you've lost me a little bit, so let's help to find me again. And I want to go back to your second point that you wanted to make, Satya.
I'll just add that, adding to the first point itself.
Yeah.
And Ambedkar literally burnt that book. He announced burning that book publicly. He burnt. That also I want to refer here.
All right. Okay, so guess, just give me a moment because I'm a little lost. I want to get back on track because this is for all of our community, and some will be totally up with you and some will be a little lost. So help me just find my way back. Sachi, there was a second point you wanted to make. What was that?
The second point was about the very writing of history itself. Collecting these stories, narratives, experiences, it is very important, but that itself will not become history. So you have to deal with the mainstream standard formats and the discipline of history itself. So that is also another challenge that I want to bring it to the discussion.
Ladies, I'm looking at tools here.
But,
go ahead, Ravi. Yeah, yep.
Yeah, but I think that Roundtable India, the formalities that has the mainstream, as Sir was talking about, the mainstream level of formalities which has to be followed. I think Roundtable India, which has been breaking that formalities, and I think that kind of a writing also
format, not formalities.
No, that format, the format itself. I mean to say the format, the way narration, everything has been changed,
well,
and even in the Dalit histories, for example.
No, not Ravi. You haven't got my point.
1 second. I think one of the things that's really powerful is that what we're all saying here is that the difficulty of working within a country in which the system of oppression is rooted within this body of faith and the laws that are so definitive about our relationship to other communities and our human dignity, that for us, we must tell our story of resistance over and over and over again, because it's not reflected within the civic institutions that we're a part of. So when you ask the question, what would it look like if we were successful, we would have equal human rights. We would be able to live our lives with dignity and pursue our freedoms the way that other people all around the world are able to do so.
You brought in a stack of pictures and I said, tell me the one that's most important. So there are probably about 50 pictures there. The pictures are from where, Tamori?
These are photographs from my project, Dalit Women Fight, which is in collaboration with the Dalit Women's Self-Respect Movement. And to go back to your story about what is my figure from Dalit history that I hold close to me.
Is it this one here?
It is.
All right, so Steadicam Dave is going to come up and we can show that. So this is the Twitter page, so at Dalit Women Fight, so you can find out more about that. And then out of those 50 or so pictures, Tamori brought this one in, and this is the one that you really wanted to talk about. Because why?
Because for me, when I think of the Dalit Women's Self-Respect Movement, I think about how we are organizing at this point of life and death. And that even though they've decided to take our land, our limbs, and our bodies, they cannot take our self-respect away. And in that photo, you have this survivor that has come forward with utter grief. And at the left side of that frame is an activist from the Dalit Women's Self-Respect Movement who said, no, you aren't going to go into the darkness.
Right.
We're here.
Tell us about this woman.
Well,
what happened to her?
She was one of the survivors who the campaign has been fighting for, and her husband was murdered in front of her, and metal rods were used to beat her breasts.
Why was her husband murdered?
It was over a land dispute.
Okay.
But it was really more about the fact that they had dared to own land in a caste Hindu-dominated area. And what was so profound was all of the other women that were part of that campaign were also survivors. And yet at that moment, her grief became our grief, but our strength also became hers. And I think this is the power of what happens when Dalit women lead. And it was one of the core originating functions of the Dalit History Month project. Because as a movement, I absolutely agree with Professor Satya. Dalit History Month is not the first time this has been attempted. But for us, this campaign is one of the largest historical challenges to caste-based sexual violence in Indian history. So when we see ourselves as makers of history, we also want to do what we're doing for our bodies, which is we want to liberate our history from those who have oppressed it.
Tamori, I love how passionate you are because you don't suffer as a Dalit. Where do you live? Where's your house?
I live here in the United States.
All right, so you live here, but you have incredible passion. You bring your passion to your work and to this show. Let me just jump into the community because the community are dying to have part of the conversation
well,
too.
Of course, you brought up the women and sexual violence is one of the big issues that Dalits in India face. And so we have a video here from someone who picks up on that theme. This is from Christina. I want you all to have a listen to her.
Issue can never be isolated with respect to what's happening to Dalits within this country. We need to face the fact that there has been a systemic structural violence perpetuated against Dalit women. This is a spectrum of violence, multiple layers of violence that pervade Dalit women's lives, ranging from being set on fire, paraded naked, murdered, raped, lynched, and molested.
So Ravi, you hear a story like that, and I know that you started your campaign, the Dalit Camera campaign, after a woman was attacked. So can you tell us what really brings you to this issue and what happened there?
See, actually, I'll just narrate a small incident of that issue. She was from a scavenging community, which is called as Arundhadiyar community, and a woman. And therefore the scavenging community couldn't mobilize, which they are not mobilized at all. And the other Dalit communities also never bothered to address that Panchayat president, actually. She was a Panchayat president. She was awarded, state awarded, and the center, that time Sonia Gandhi's Congress was ruling. Sonia Gandhi awarded her as a best Panchayat president. And, but still she was attacked by the upper caste in the neighbor. But there was no Dalit movement as such to question that. And that is where we went. But there were pockets of movements which were protesting from the scavenging caste, which that made me to think, if we are calling a Dalit as a one united community, but why there are different Dalit caste and different responses are there for different communities. And adding to that fact, I want to also say, in
Ravi, I have
Tamil
less
Nadu,
than 1 minute left, so just finish your
Yeah, I'll
sentence
just
so
say,
everybody knows how the story ends. It ends in what way?
yeah, the story, I have to add this point actually. In Tamil Nadu, when Dalit atrocity we speak about, among Dalits, like Adi Dravidas are there, Arundhadiyas are there. Within them, there are atrocities, sexual violence, whatever you name it, on Dalits, general Dalits, what you're discussing, it happens on them.
Right.
And I also request that Dalit History Month has to look into that issues also to address that. And she was a victim with that politics.
All right. You were just hearing Ravi there. We also had Satya Temuri and Sangha Pali. To me, for listening to your conversation, it sounds like you need a Dalit year, not a Dalit month.
Absolutely.
And thank you for introducing us to the current concerns of the Dalit community and some Dalit heroes and heroines as well. Really appreciate it very much indeed. I will see you next time on the stream with Marika Bilal. We'll be talking about Ecuador and organ donation. That should be another interesting conversation. See you soon.